I'm Ankush Jain. I'm a coach based in the UK, and I'm here to talk about self-esteem today, which is an interesting topic because it's something that I probably struggled with for a very long time when I was a teenager and into my 20s as well. You know, it's something that I probably didn't tell anyone about, but yeah, I didn't really feel good about myself. I didn't really feel confident. I didn't feel secure in my own skin. I was scared of people finding out. I would hide it. I don't know if people can relate to this. Maybe some people can. And I really didn't think I could do anything about it, apart from eventually I came across personal development type stuff and was looking for ways to boost my confidence. And a lot of it was just fake it until you make it. But that seemed to work on a surface level. So, and I would push myself out of my comfort zone, as they say, and I would, take action that looked uncomfortable to me. And there were certain things that did help. From even just going to university and being in a different environment and making friends through to, getting a job and just normal living life. But there was always this, deep-seated belief that I wasn't good enough. And it was only years later that someone pointed out to me that how would you ever work out whether you were enough? Like there's no way to measure it. It's completely conceptual. So if I have a belief that I'm not enough, if I think that I'm not enough, then I'm not enough. If I think that I am, then I will be. And I'm sure there are people who are listening to this who know people in their lives who seem to have a whole load of confidence, even in the face of what would seem like no reason whatsoever to have that confidence. So if self-esteem, if feeling good enough was based on reality, then that wouldn't be the case. Like if it was our circumstances causing us, or our skill set or our abilities would be the source of our self-esteem or not, then that wouldn't make sense. Similarly, I used to believe, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's not my circumstances, but this is a personal thing. Maybe I don't have self-esteem. Maybe I'm not confident, and other people might understand that, or be fine with their circumstances and be very confident and happy about it. But maybe I can't. Maybe it's a personality thing. But if that was the case, then why is it? Because again, I would meet people who seem to be really confident. I remember I went to the same school between 6 and 11. Then I went to a different school, and then I came back to a not the same school, but the school next door when I was 16. And I met some people who I'd gone to school with who were really, really confident when I'd known them when I was younger. And then when I met them 5 years later, 6 years later, for some reason, they weren't confident. Similarly, the other way around, when I was, my late teens at university, I saw a guy that I knew from school who wasn't confident at school. And then he was really confident. So, either people are faking it or something's going on with that. People seem to be able to change both from having high self-esteem and I'm using confidence kind of ties in and manage to lose it and the other way around. So maybe it's not a personality thing. So, the way that I thought self-esteem and confidence worked didn't, there seemed to be holes in that theory. It didn't seem to really add up. And I didn't really have an answer for that. Okay, great. What do you do with that? Like I said, the best thing that I could do for many years was fake it until I made it, so to speak. But eventually, when I hit 30, I got introduced to something that some people call the three principles, but the name's not important. I got introduced to, in essence, how our mind really works, how confidence works, how self-esteem works, how everything works, right? And I love the title of your series of The Secret of Everything, because it really is about everything. And even though I wasn't looking to become more confident at a stage, even though I wasn't looking for more self-esteem, I found self-esteem, so to speak, not by doing a technique, not by faking it, not by anything really, but seeing that my lack of self-esteem, well, seeing that everything, right, not just lack of self-esteem, was a reflection of my own thinking. And my thinking changes from moment to moment, so it's not fixed. It's not like my Ankush's thinking is a certain way and Ankush's thinking is, low self-esteem thinking, and someone else's thinking is high self-esteem thinking. It was actually, sometimes I feel pretty good and sometimes I don't feel really good. Sometimes I feel really, really low and down and upset and think I'm worthless. And why didn't I do this? And, oh, you always do this. And I've beat myself up. And sometimes I feel on top of the world. And there's really no pattern to that, apart from the fact, when you look at it, that it's a moment to moment thing. I've had times where I've gone on holiday because it looks like, well, maybe I feel better when I'm on holiday. And there've been times when I've been on holiday and I haven't enjoyed it. And on the flip side, there've been times when I've been in a really tough situation where I think, beforehand, I wouldn't be in a good place. And it's been the opposite. And maybe people listening to this will notice the same thing for them. Now, how is that helpful? Well, it was helpful for me because if my self-esteem or lack of it, or if confidence or lack of it is a moment-to-moment thing coming from my thinking, well, then I don't need to worry about that. Now, that doesn't mean you get stuck with whatever level of self-esteem you've got. What tends to happen is when you're not worrying about that so much, you'll tap into your own, which is what happened to me, your own inbuilt natural self-esteem. Because and I've written a book about this, not particularly just self-esteem, but about how the mind works. And what I talk about is when we were very young, 2-3 years old, we had confidence, self-esteem, communication skills, presence, confidence, everything that we might be looking for when we're a little bit older, that we think we don't have, or we think it's a personality thing. We're actually born with that. And I'm not saying that as a nice theory or a nice saying, but reflect on that for yourself. Think about when you were 2-3 years old. Did you have, oh, you know what, I tried to walk and I fell down. God, what do the other babies think about me? Like you didn't have low self-esteem. Babies don't have low self-esteem. Right? Toddlers don't have low self-esteem if they can't walk as quickly as another toddler. They just don't have that. They don't have that thinking. And so that's our true essence, if you like. That's the real us, is the us before we have all of that belief and thinking going on. And so if that's the way we're born, it's not something we need to develop. It's something we need to rediscover, so to speak. It's something that's already inside of us. And the way that we rediscover it is not by doing more. It's by, brushing away all the stuff that's not true. And what I believe is that, once we get a little bit older, 4, 5, 6 years old, we stop picking up beliefs from parents, from teachers, from friends, from TV, about how the world works, and it's not true. And as we start picking up those beliefs, that then creates our reality, right? So if you have a belief that you know, you can't be the popular kid, I don't know, because someone didn't invite you to their birthday party, you're not popular, well, then that becomes your reality. As a baby wouldn't care. It would just go to the party anyway, right? It wouldn't be worried. And you know, if we could all grow up with the same level of no thinking as babies do, we'd all have an incredible amount of swagger. You'd be like a cool baby. That's crazy metaphor, but we would. And for me, I've been rediscovering that time, or that part of me that's been constant since I was a very young kid. And it's been like taking a little brush pan and brushing away all those beliefs that just simply aren't true. So I don't know if that's a helpful monologue.
It's absolutely brilliant. That was so clear and so good. That's lovely. Thank you. And I always like hearing about how it was when we were very tiny, because it becomes so much more obvious then, I think. But the last bit that you just said just brought a picture to my mind of an archaeologist doing a dig and finding what's really there, clearing away all the stuff. And that's really good. So how long did it take you to rediscover who you really are in once you found out about this understanding of how our experience works?
So there's two ways to answer this. One way is things started shifting very, very quickly. So as soon as I was introduced to how the mind works, those beliefs and stories and untruths started to lose their power, and they started to crumble, and some of them crumbled very quickly. For example, I dropped a lot of my stories in my job and at work, and I just started to perform better, and I started to spend less time procrastinating, and it could have looked like, oh, Ankush has got more self-esteem, Ankush is more confident at work. So some things shifted really quickly. In the realm of dating, things shifted, a little bit after that. Things started to shift, but fairly quickly. But it's, so on one way, really quick, and another way, it's been over 6 years now, and I'm still rediscovering. So it's kind of hard to answer that, I'm not saying this is going to take you 10 years, because things can shift very quickly, as they did for me. And when people meet me, who haven't seen me for a while, that they'll often comment on how I seem different to them, how I seem to have this calmer energy, or presence, or less ego, or a number of different things. But I'm still me. It's not like I'm trying to be someone else. They go, you're still you, but different. But that's an ongoing journey. So I'm probably never going to get to the stage where I have literally no thinking like I did as a child, but that's okay. I don't need to, and you don't need to do that. So what I always encourage people is, if I'm saying something that sounds useful, if I'm saying something that sounds interesting, we'll explore that for yourself. And if this doesn't sound interesting, if this sounds like a load of rubbish, fine, leave it. I'm not in the business of trying to force my insights on people, or my way of thinking, because I hate that being done to me. So really, all I'm doing is going, hey, this is what worked for me. This is what shifted for me. This is what's continuing to shift. If you'd like to join me on that journey, and Anne and all the other people that she's interviewed, if you'd like to have a look at what everyone's talking about and seemingly making a difference for them, well, explore it for yourself. And don't take anything that I say, or Anne says, or anyone else for granted, because then you're taking on another set of beliefs. but instead really explore it. I know when I got introduced to how our mind works, I really thought some of the people that I met on that journey were just in cloud cuckoo land. I thought it can't be that simple. This is far too simplistic. But things started changing for me, and I'd signed up to this longer course, so I kind of was in it for a few months anyway. But I kept challenging it. I kept exploring it, and at the beginning, I was like, "Well, I'll take a bit from here, and I'm not going to go all in like these lot are, but I'll take what works for me." And that was really helpful. And I just kept exploring. I kept exploring, and I've always said, if I find something else that makes more sense, well, I'll be sharing that. And I mean it. And I'm always exploring. I'm always that's a hobby of mine. I love, my day job, if you like, is that of being a coach. So I'm always looking into what creates transformation. I'm always looking into how to help people. I'm always looking into how to help myself. But the number one thing I found in all of my exploration has been, understanding how the mind works is pivotal, because it takes stuff off my mind, and it kind of creates a really solid foundation for anything else I do in the world. If I have more self-esteem, it's not hard to see everything else in life is just probably going to get a bit easier. If you have low self-esteem, you're probably going to sabotage your relationships. If you've got low self-esteem, you're not going to do so well in your career. If you've got low self-esteem, you're probably not going to handle your money as well as you might. If you've got low self-esteem, fill in the blank. There's all these implications of that, and you can do the opposite of that with high self-esteem. And so if high self-esteem is inbuilt, and we can harness that by just sweeping away those beliefs that are not true, then that's just a really helpful thing.
So I'm interested. Tell us a bit more about the dating and how it affected your dating, because you said that was one of the things that changed. And I know that and particularly for men, I know there are a lot of men who are totally not confident in themselves when it comes to dating, and are always there's a whole industry out there looking for, providing information for men. This is what you have to do, and this is what you have to do to get the girls, and so on. So how did it change for you?
Yeah, and I probably looked into some of those programs in my 20s because it was interesting to me. I mean, when you're 19, what are you really interested? Not university, girls. Like that's what I was interested in, and my lack of self-esteem showed up most clearly in a lack of women wanting to date me when I was 19 years old. So I can totally relate to that. And what's really interesting is there's some really good information out there with regards to dating and relationships, and there's some really bad information out there. And I thought I was quite discerning in finding the better information, and with the better information, the stuff that it was pointing to was still, to me, seen as a doing, right? So the better information wouldn't be about manipulating women or trying to trick people into liking you. The better information was more about, if you want to meet an interesting woman, if you want to meet a great woman, and I think most guys do, well, every guy pretty much does if they're single, then it helps to be a great guy. That really spoke to me. Well, yeah, why didn't I think of that before? And that's what really started me off on my own personal development journey. But becoming a great guy doesn't have to be such an arduous process. What I didn't see was I was a great guy, and so is everybody else. And it's, here's a funny thing that might be interesting, and I have no evidence for this apart from my own experience. But I remember when I was very young, I think I was, again, 20 years old, I had a job, and I didn't think I was particularly good looking. I didn't think I was particularly attractive. And I thought that was really important. I thought, if I was really good looking, I'd have more self-esteem, I'd be more confident, that would affect surely the dating world. It always seemed to be that women hung around with guys who were generally better looking. And there was another guy I worked with, I won't say any names or anything else, but I didn't think he was that good looking. And all the women in the office were like, oh yeah, he's really hot. He's a really good looking guy. And I remember thinking, well, I don't think I'm good looking, but he's not good looking. Like, yeah, like I'm not a woman, but I don't think this guy's good looking. And he wasn't traditionally attractive. I don't think he would have been a film star or anything else, but he had a lot of swagger. He had a lot of confidence. And when I asked, some of the girls, I'm like, you think he's really good looking? They went, yeah, he's so confident. And I found that women would see guys who were the same level of looks, but if they were confident, they in their head would say, well, that guy's better looking, even though looks wise they were necessarily the same. And I would see the opposite, where if a guy was good looking, but they didn't like his personality, automatically, certainly the women in my life would say, well, he's not that good looking. I'm like, yeah, I think he's good looking. Yeah, but he's a jackass. He's whatever. And so, it's useful to see that. And I've certainly seen it, that as my own self-esteem has increased and my own confidence in myself has increased, I've been called, good looking by more and more people. And I mean, even in photographs, I mean, I'm married now, and my wife, I think I look remarkably similar. I've aged quite well. I look remarkably similar to, say, 15 years ago. Just probably put on a few kilos of weight as I get older. But my wife will say, oh, you look better looking now than you did, 15 years ago. But if you look at my face, my haircut, my body, it's really, really similar. And I think even in photographs, the way that subconsciously you carry yourself, that self-esteem or confidence just shines through. So it's really, really key. And I saw this with so many things that I learned in my 20s about dating and relationships, that they are kind of side effects of seeing how the mind works, right? So like self-esteem, everyone's born with it. If you really realize the nature of self-esteem, you will tap into your own self-esteem. You are going to be more attractive, not just to women, not just in dating. I mean, generally, we like hanging around people who've got high self-esteem. So tick, right? Confidence, the same. Tick. That's a natural side effect. Presence. Women will say that they want a guy who's really present with them. I was a terrible listener, and I was such a terrible listener because I had this voice going on in my head all the time, because I was so worried about what other people would think of me. I really didn't want anyone to think badly of me. Well, guess what? When that gets taken off your mind, when you don't care, because you realize no matter what anyone thinks about you, it has no ability to impact you, no ability to make you feel good or bad. I didn't see that for years. Well, once that's taken off your mind, guess what? You're more present. When you're more present, you're a better listener. You're a better listener. Again, massive tick in terms of dating and relationships. I remember a dating coach once saying, a lot of guys go around saying, oh, does she like me? Does she like me? Does she like me? He says, I don't do that. I ask myself, do I like her? Do I like her? And I thought, wow, this guy's very confident, like to do that. Wow. Like, God, he's got some, something about him. And, oh, apologies. I didn't switch my phone off. Bad for me. Right. Let me get rid of that. So he didn't think about things in the same way that I did. But what I found, and I don't mean this in an arrogant way whatsoever, but when I stopped being so worried about what people thought about me, then naturally I started to consider, well, do I like hanging around with this person? Do I like this woman? Do I want to hang around with this man or woman? And so it's a lot more empowering place to come from. And again, young children are kind of like this. Oh, I like you, I don't like you. They're just very, very straightforward. So this has a huge, huge, huge implication around dating. I've actually got a client of mine who's a coach, and he's a young guy, and he is a dating coach. but everything he shares with men around dating is from how the mind works. And he says himself, it's had such a huge impact on so many things, and how, you know, sometimes learning around, you know, information around dating and relationships actually made him worse with women.
So can you just say a little bit more about why it is that it doesn't matter what other people think of you? Because people might not quite understand that, I think.
Okay, so if what other people think of you has the ability to make you feel good or bad, then it's really important to be concerned about what other people think about you. But the nature of our experience, the nature of our minds, I'm getting a little bit technical here, but just bear with me. How our minds work is that our experience of life is just created moment to moment via our thinking. So it's a moment to moment thing, right? Someone probably didn't like you and it was really important to you, and now you've forgotten about it. Because you've forgotten about it, it doesn't matter anymore, right? So again, and similarly the other way around, someone liking you, you might feel good and then you forget. But it's all based on our thinking. It's all made up. So when I saw that, or a glimpse of it, because I forget it still from time to time, but when I started to really understand that, I stopped caring about what people thought about me. When for years I was so bothered about it, because it really looked like to me, if people liked me, I'd feel good. So what happens? I turn naturally into a people pleaser, which is really, really unattractive for everybody. But as soon as I saw, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, if, you know, and think about people who do stuff in the world, right? And this is, I'm going to use a controversial figure here, right? But if you look at Trump, people might hate him and people might love him, but he doesn't care. If he cared what people thought about him, if anyone cared what people thought about them, they nowadays more so than ever, you get less done. And I think now in the world, in this age of social media, I think in today's world, people that don't care about what others think about them are the ones that are seemingly successful. Now, again, I'm using Trump as a controversial figure. Some people say he's successful, some people say he isn't, but he got a pretty big job. You know, he got a pretty big job. And I think that, you know, if we look at politics, and this might not be really interesting for some people, but politicians that are really, really worried about what people think about them, that ship sailed now. Then they're not doing well. And if you look across the world, politicians who are just saying it as it is are seemingly attracting, you know, more support, and, you know, they're willing to not be liked. And it's the same in business. It's the same in leadership. If you're willing to take, I met a colleague of mine who I used to work with who's very, very successful. He used to be my boss and he's gone on to bigger and better things. And he's a really nice guy, but he's not worried about people not liking him. He does his job, and if it means firing people, he will fire people for the good of the company. And he was the best person I've ever worked for. And he's really, really successful. And I also worked for a guy who was really concerned, senior leader, who was really concerned about what people thought about him. So he never took any decisions, and he was terrible to work for because nothing got done. And you see this in, you know, in every part of life. Again, if we come back to dating, you know, as a man, I believe if you're trying to be all things to all women, and I've been there, you know, no one's interested. You'll be firmly in the friend zone with everyone, you know, just a nice person. But, and again, this isn't about doing things on purpose. This isn't about being mean or horrible or saying controversial things, but it's about not being so concerned about what people think about you, and just being yourself. You know, there's that age old saying, just be yourself. But so many people are worried about that because of backlash or not being liked. And this is not something new that I'm telling you. I mean, this, if you go back thousands of years, the traditional wisdom was, the same. I remember reading this about this old Buddhist proverb about this guy who, was really well respected, and then his reputation got trashed, and then it turned out it was a mistake, and kind of you go through this proverb of all these things, and he was exactly the same. He was the same throughout. No matter what happened, he was unfazed. And so this is wisdom going back thousands of years. It's just now more noticeable with things like social media. So again, look at comedians. If you were a comedian that didn't want to offend anyone, you wouldn't have any gigs. But comedians who are willing to, say certain things that some people would get offended by, they are rewarded by that. So again, it's not about being horrible or mean, but it's about, not making it all about you. And that becomes easy to do once you understand that it doesn't matter what people think about you. That has no ability to really make you feel anything unless you think it does. Because then if you think it does, then it will. But if you realize that's also within your power, well, then you're taking the power back. And like I said earlier, this is very empowering. This is the most empowering thing I've ever learned, because before, the power was in everyone else's hands, right? Power was, if a girl likes me, God, that makes me feel good. If my boss gives me a promotion, that makes me feel good. If this happens and that happens and these things make me feel bad, well, guess what? I was powerless. I was in a world, I was a victim of the world. I was a victim of my circumstances. But once I understood that, well, that's not how the world works. And by the way, most people don't know this. This is a very radical new paradigm in psychology. This is, cutting edge stuff. Well, that changes everything. It stops me being a victim of the world and moves me to being a really powerful person in the world that creates their own reality. And like I said, this is around for a long time. People that have understood this for centuries have been very powerful. I mean, you just need to go through history and see how people showed up. We didn't have a way of interpreting that. We just used to think, wow, these people are really bright and clever, and I wish I thought like that. But no, what they're saying is underpinned by an understanding. For us now, we can see underpinned by reality. This is true for every single person.
So people might be wondering, that's really great, and I love that really explains it well. And people might be wondering, so what does that have to do with money? How does money come into this? Because you said that even affects money and how you make money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, if you've got low, I'll keep it really simple. If you've got low self-esteem, well, you're less likely to go for the promotion. If you've got low self-esteem, you're less likely to go for that job that pays better. And I'm not talking as a theoretical. This was me. For years, I always played it safe because I didn't have a very good opinion of myself. Other people had a good opinion of me, and I used to thrive off that because I felt like I needed it. But one of the things that changed for me 6 years ago when I started to understand how the mind worked was I applied for a job that was literally, I thought, was out of reach for me. There's no way I would get it. I wouldn't have even applied for it. And I sailed through the interview process, and I got the job very easily and quickly. Now, if I had known, and it's harder, by the way, later on in life to do that. If I'd known that when I was a graduate or a teenager, I would have set my aspirations much higher, and wouldn't have been worried about, well, if I go for something and I don't get it, that's okay. So I would have been earning more. I would have been more, financially successful. And similarly, when we have low self-esteem, it's more common to buy stuff because we think it's going to make us feel better, right? Oh, I've got low self-esteem. Let me go out shop. And again, hold my hand up. This is what I did, right? I'd feel bad. Let me go and buy something, make myself feel better. And there's levels of this. Some people really go crazy and get into credit card debt. I was never that extreme, but I did. I would spend money to make myself feel better. But again, if you're someone with high self-esteem, you're less likely to do that. You know, you don't need to fill that void, if you like, with material stuff. You know, that like there's a saying that men who buy sports cars have right, and it's because there's an element of people thinking, well, they're compensating, they're compensating. Now that's not always true, of course, but there's an element of that. And again, when I used to feel not good enough, I'm like, oh, but if I have that car, yeah, then I'll be somebody, then people will look at me, then I'll, you know, and it's just less important for me. Now if I do get a sports car in the future, I might do, I know it's, and I've known this for a while, I had a car which I really loved. It wasn't a sports car, but it was a very fast car, and I loved it. And I knew my happiness wasn't coming from the car, and I got to really enjoy it. This isn't about enjoying things. I find that I enjoy any material stuff I've got now much more than I had before, because before it was never enough. Well, you can't get enough of something that you don't need, right? Like if you want to try and quench your thirst by drinking seawater, you'll never have enough, because it can't quench your thirst. If you buy material stuff to try and fill that hole of low self-esteem, you'll never have enough, because it can't do that. It's not possible. So this has implications across the board, you know, from dating to money to career. I mean, to your family. I mean, people that have, you know, there can be difficult relationships in family. But again, if you've got low self-esteem, you're going to get hurt more easily. Someone's going to say something, oh, I'm not going to put up with that. And we fall out with family, we fall out with people. Again, if you've got high self-esteem, you don't let it bother you. Now, that doesn't mean you become, you know, walked over. It might mean that you don't hang around with someone so much. It might be the opposite. Again, if you've got high self-esteem, it might mean that you don't hang around with someone who just is just a bit nasty and not nice to hang around, but you don't take it personally. So this has implications really across the board.
So now I'm interested in, how did you come to write your book? Because if you had all this low self-esteem, and I know that's changed now, but how did you actually come to write a book?
Well, it did come about as you know, as I changed. I probably wouldn't have written the book. Well, I didn't write a book, did I? But I wouldn't have written a book in my 20s. And if I had written a book in my 20s, it would have been a very different book, you know, based on what I thought was true at the time. But again, I would have been hiding with writing a book, pretending to be something with low self-esteem. But what changed was I started experiencing so much shift in my own life. And I then quit my corporate job. I turned into a coach. I started coaching people. They started to have shifts. Their self-esteem started to increase. You know, one of the number one, I work a lot with men, and one of the number one things I find, which is why we chose this topic with men, is not feeling good enough. You know, it's a very, very common thing. But that started to shift. And that doesn't mean I never have those thoughts or I'd never feel not good enough, but I just don't pay it so much attention anymore, because I know it's temporary. And so when it's, you know, it's temporary, it just passes. So I was able to write a book not because I never felt negative or never felt down or never felt low. I was writing the book and I was thinking, this is horseshit. No one's going to read this. This is rubbish. But I just didn't take that thinking seriously. And, you know, and I'm not saying be delusional. I would sense check it. So my wife would read some chapters, and she's critical. She's you know, she's not the kind of person who would say, yeah, honey, it's great, if she doesn't think so. And she read it and she goes, yeah, no, this is really good. And my own coach read it as well, and he's written a lot of books. So you know, it was sense checked, and I got some feedback to improve it, and I did. So it was just a case of just getting on and doing it in a very practical way. And when I was having those moments of doubt and like, oh God, is this any good? You know, I didn't really go into this spiral of, you know, I shouldn't write a book and who am I and whatever. It was like, oh yeah, I'm just going through one of those thought storms right now.
So what was it that started you on writing the book in the first place? Because if you hadn't written a book before, how did it sort of, what happened to make you want to write a book? Was there some inspiration?
Well, so here's the thing. You probably will have noticed I talk a lot, right? I don't think anyone will have missed that. So for years, when I was so into personal development, I would learn stuff and I'd be so excited and passionate about it that I would tell people, I'd tell my friends and people at work and whatever. And so people had told me for years, Kush, you should write a book. You should write a book, because I had so much information in my head. So I knew for a long time I would probably write a book, but I didn't want to just write a book for the sake of writing a book. I wanted to have something to say. And so I was going through so much transformation. I had all this stuff to say, but I don't know what I was waiting for, just the right time or something. I in my head, I was like, I will know when it's time to write a book. And then one of my clients wrote his own book. And then that kind of told me, well, look, if someone I'm introducing to this stuff has written something and it's a really good book. Henk Gok wrote this great book. And that's more of a kind of a spiritual book. But I was like, well, maybe it's time for me to write it. And then I just started writing, and the book almost wrote itself. It was really quite straightforward. The editing took a bit longer. That I found more challenging. But the book, the manuscript, wrote itself almost, because it just, all this stuff started coming out. And it's like this call. I didn't know what I was going to say before I started talking, but it kind of has come out. And it was the same thing for my book. I started writing, and then, oh yeah, I could say that, and oh, that makes sense, and oh yeah, I can see this.
Yeah, so you didn't know exactly what you were going to say from before you started. You didn't have a big plan of it's going to be this, this, and this before you started.
No, not at all, not at all. And I think that's so true. Going back to the baby thing as well. Babies don't know how they're going to learn to walk or how they're going to learn to talk, and they just have less thinking about it, so they just do it. So if it's the same thing with writing a book, which is probably the biggest project I've ever taken on, but it could be, transitioning your career. It could be, anything that you're doing. Just take the next step, and then take the next step, and then take the next step. And again, tying this back into self-esteem, generally people that have a high self-esteem, it doesn't mean that they're smarter, but if you generally got higher self-esteem, you're going to just take the next step and get on with it, and be listening less to those doubtful voices in your head. And if you've got low self-esteem, you're going to get in your own way and not take those next steps. Both mindsets, if you like, you've got to take the steps. And it's not really a mindset of high self-esteem. It's that's an implication of really understanding who you are. I think you muted.
Forgot to put my microphone back on. Yeah. So I've asked all the questions that have come to me. So I'm just wondering if anyone else has got any questions. And if you have got a question, you can either type it into the chat box, or you can put your hand up and ask to come on and speak if you'd like to. And anything else that, while we're waiting to see if anyone's got any questions, is there anything else that you think that's coming to you that we've missed or that you haven't spoken about yet? I think you've covered pretty much everything that I can think of.
Nothing that comes to mind, but I do hope that people do watch this, and I do hope that people, beyond the words, kind of get an essence of what I'm pointing to do. I really wish I had a video of me from 10 years ago for people to really see this, because a lot of people underestimate how much of a change I've gone through. And I remember when I was starting on my coaching practice, a lot of my early clients were people that had known me from years earlier and had seen such a big shift that they were like, okay, what's gone on with you? Right. So I wish I could, this isn't just you might hear stories from other people, oh yeah, I used to be so different and now I'm changed. I wish people could see just how insecure I was. I used to take things so personally. And so that's why I can be so confident speaking about this, because I know if I could change, I was the most insecure person I knew, that, I know it's possible for anyone else to change. It really is.
Yeah, and obviously I didn't know you before you came across this understanding, but I've known you quite a long time now, and even at the beginning of the time, you've changed even in the time that I've known you. So you're much more relaxed and much more confident and much than right at the beginning. So I know that much. And if you've got any photographs of how you used to be when you were younger, we'll put some of those up as well. So that'll be good.
Oh dear. Now I'm starting to feel insecure.
Okay, so we don't seem to, you must have said everything because we don't have any questions. So thanks so much, Ankush. It's been so good. You have really spoken about that really well. And there will be links to everything about you, your website and your book and so on underneath the video when it's on YouTube now. And well, within the next 24 hours at least. And thank you so much for being here. That's been really, really, really good. So
thank you for inviting me. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. And I'm sure people will have got a lot out of it. So thanks. Okay, see you again soon. Bye then.
Cheers.